everyone. I'm Sarah Christensen with One Sage's View Astrology, and welcome back. We are looking at Luke Newton and Nicolae Coughlan for their promo tour stop in Rio de Janeiro. This is the part two. Video before this is the first part of that Rio exploration of the astrology. So you can dive in and get a further understanding of the energies from the planetary transits of the moment when they were in Rio de Janeiro, because it was a very interesting part of the promo tour. I think it was really peaking, and the astrology aligns with that, of a peaking moment for them and their time together there. So it's fun to explore this. Of course, this is for entertainment purposes, and we can't validate every little thing here because we're not having a kind of one-on-one with either one of these individuals. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind. But we can get a lot of sense of what the archetypal energy presents, and then it's influencing what they may experience between their connection. Okay, so I want to point that out. I like to kind of be very respectful of the individual souls of whatever their journey is, okay? A lot of individuals who are first getting into astrology don't understand the impact that astrology can have when you start opening up to it. So when you start looking, sincerely to go on that inner world exploration of yourself, there is some initiation things that happen and occur for you, and it kind of then boots into you waking up to it as well. So that is important to kind of keep in mind about astrology. Astrology is an esoteric tradition and the mysteries, and it's important that we keep in mind that for millennia, this has been, the occult. It's been hidden. It's been kept apart. And now, as we're emerging into the Aquarian age, this is going to be more and more. Astrology, of course, is having a renaissance, of people being interested in astrology as it's continuing to grow. And I think the younger generations, absolutely, it's almost expected. So I want to point that out, okay? When you study things of the occult, like astrology, like the tarot, and these kinds of things, and there are other, schools of mystery to explore as you get into that spiritual awakening and what that means for you as an individual. I think that's very important to keep in mind here. Okay. And they both were looking at their astrology on this promo tour. And I think that's important that opened up for them in Australia. I think it was after they did the To-Doom interview when they were exploring the astrology of Colin and Penelope, which are fictional characters, but I think it was an opportunity that they would open up to explore their own astrology. And I think that is almost like the universe is knocking on their door and saying, hello, pay attention here. This is good to look into for yourself and the journey that you are on. Because I think the journey that Nicolae Coughlan and Luke Newton are on is really significant. And the more I explore their astrology, I keep getting pulled into the direction of the Eros and Psyche. That's what prompted this series to begin with. But I also think it's also about what each soul can learn from their astrology and bring forward, and what they're navigating in what their purpose was for the incarnation of them as they are in each of their personalities as Nicolae Coughlan and Luke Newton. And we each all have our own. So I'm Sarah Christensen, and I've lived almost 55 years this year. And I think it's important to kind of think of the whole history that you are up to a certain point, but also what your astrology, your natal promise has as a potential for what your full self-actualized, what is that? What does that look like? It's reflected in your chart. And the astrology is simply reflecting truth. So the natal chart and then any given moment in time is reflecting back a truth. Now, there are layers of understanding of what has been acted upon and what has manifested for individuals in any given moment, okay? And sometimes they're the ones being inspired to take the action, or they have the instinctual urge to take the action, or they are responding to that from somebody else in the interplay with each other, okay? So I hope that kind of gives some essential baseline to kind of keep in mind here. But it's exciting to see what's going on with the astrology for these two when they're in Rio de Janeiro, because it was a peaking moment. And that is absolutely confirmed on the astrology based on all of the planets lining up in Taurus. And now that lands into their charts in Luke's career. It's like a peaky moment in Luke's career in his public persona before June 12th. And there's a reason that it lines up on his career house more than Nicola, because Nicola's Taurus is at the bottom of her chart, and it's about home and where her, her foundation, her roots. And when you put those two together, there's an interesting, almost like an interesting tree of life. Okay. Yeah. So I want to kind of keep that in mind as we go forward, but I want to finish off the Rio de Janeiro, kind of what that moment gave us in the astrology and the transits to, and its relationship to their natal charts. Okay. Their natal promise. I think it's also important to consider that each soul is participating, I think, with also soul contracts. And I think I mentioned that before, but I want to reiterate it here just so people understand that if we have something that we're trying to evolve, we often need other people to help bring the storyline together to actually have something play out for us to have the aha moment. And so in those moments, you have soul contracts. There, to me, there is a will at the soul level. And then there's life on earth, and that's the ego. And the ego has its will to stay alive, so we create an ego while we're incarnate in a body. But on another level, outside of the body, we have also agreements and commitments and bonds with people. And that's why I could even read astrology as those relationships and how they come together. So I hope that gives you some foundation. I'm sure it's going to bring forward a lot more questions. Usually that happens with astrology, more questions. That's good for you to explore, like what's surfacing, what kind of questions come for me as I explore this information, because that's important for you, even though you're interplaying with the information as it is for Luke and Nicola. Okay. Yeah. Because let me put it this way. As an astrologer, I've been an astrologer for 13 plus years now, and I came to astrology for my own personal kind of needing to understand something really desperately at a period in my life. And then dreams that came for me opened me up. Oh, I would have never otherwise considered astrology. I was very much in the corporate world and doing well and working, but because of things that were emerging for me personally in my personal life, that's how I unfolded into astrology. And then I had to dive in. I was obsessed about it. And then I learned so much, and then it becomes something I would teach others and do readings. So with the questions that come are actually nice to have as kind of like where you're going with it, because you may be interested in it for Luke and Nicola because you're curious. That's your first step as a student is, I'm curious. Why is that behaving that way? Why is that like that? And what's interesting is that if you are curious about them, then that may point back to you of being curious about yourself and curious about your own natal chart. So I just want to point that out because questions that come are really important and worth writing down and having like a little journal that you keep for your curiosity about it, because it can grow. It's like a little seed, and then it starts to, put down roots, and then it starts, putting up leaves. So take that in mind for your own personal growth and your own personal interest of what does the astrology present for me? Why am I so curious about it? What am I learning about these two individuals and their journey, and then what I might learn about for myself. So anyway, you can always contact me. You can leave comments on the community page. You can DM me. I am on Instagram at One Sage's View. So same as well. And you can DM me from Instagram. I'm on there. You can send me a message also from my website. There's a contact page. So either way, I'm happy to, answer a quick question, but I encourage people to get at least a first reading to explore what that means for them. So let's go. Let's dive into it and see what the astrology of Rio de Janeiro continues to present for us for these two. Let's go.
But the thing is who acted first, right? Like, I think flirty, and Nicola is that's her everyday mojo. She is funny, hilarious, and that would have him amped and feeling comfortable. And so, but I do think it was Luke who would have made a move. She would have just been being herself, happy, joyful, flirty, probably, and a little bit naughty. How, she tracks that. She's just the way she thinks. Her Mars and Aries, come on, it's instinctual. But it's like it cannot be the thing that blocks her, right? Like she has to be aware that, and that's the thing. She could fall into, if she does do, have so much attractive, like she's just a fireball of energy and she attracts this thing in, and then she enjoys it, then she might feel guilty or shame for a moment. Some people let the shame and guilt for something being very human in a moment hit them too hard because of their upbringing. So let's go on upbringing for just a minute. I know that Nicola came out of a religious household, right? Like Catholic or something. She's Irish, right? So was it Catholic? I can't remember, but definitely, a lot of people born around that period of time have some kind of religious thing with coming from their parents, and then they're breaking out of it. Being born, when she was born, you have the Pluto. Pluto is a deep transformation, and sexuality is a very strong thing to be transformed by. Let's just put it that way. The more that humans acknowledge they are having a human experience, and if it's harshly judged, then you start getting burdened with guilt and shame that shouldn't even be there, and then it hinders your own free expression, an acknowledgement of exactly who you are in any year, that kind of thing. But those are the things that we can get conditioned when we're younger, and we might penalize ourselves for having a very open kind of freedom with ourselves, and we're having relationships, that can be something that is picked up, right? But hers is like Gemini, the duality of this and that, or comparing. There's a potential danger of comparison, and then what goes on in the unconscious mind for Nicole that might be trying to be working itself out, because the Mercury is in Capricorn on the sun for her, but also her Juno is in Capricorn in her 12th house. There is something connecting Saturn to her partner. And that is something very strong in terms of their connection, is her Saturn in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is very much like higher learning with, that purpose, vision, but it's also foreign, Sagittarius is very much the foreign traveler, the foreign travels, a friend like that. But it's so connected to his North Node and his vertex. Her Saturn is connected to his vertex, and that vertex is like a faded connection. And Rio de Janeiro is this really amplified sensuality, sexuality, high ego inflation. Even you're gonna have a fall after ego inflation. That's just normal way it goes. Can you recover? Yes. Get grounded, put your feet in grass, go help others less fortunate than you, get real, get back to work. Those are things that can bring your ego down. Do a campaign to help others like she was doing throughout that tour. That is what's so fascinating about her, is all the things that she does as a person. Yeah. What else? There's just so many. I still think his action, her instincts coming together, but highly sensual. Her personal space. Right? Yeah. And then the event, look at that. This is the ascendant of the event starting. Okay. I always kind of think of when does something start, because it kind of gives you a little bit of information about how the energy will flow. Well, that's accentuating her, probably could be close to her midheaven. It's definitely close to her Ceres, what feeds you, because Ceres is kind of what feeds you, but also there can be a little bit of grief in the seed of it, which I think in time will show some of that, right? Like there could be like, this happened in Rio, and then what happens in June 12th, right? Like, oh goodness, right? This is going sideways, and not in a good way that I want to be dealing with, but I have to. But what else? Oh, where's the so that's the ascendant of the moment. That means Jupiter is amplified, and that's amplifying things that are unfolding for her in a very kind of faded experience. It's fate, bringing it straight up. But fate and destiny are two words that are interesting, especially in astrology. Something I think of destiny as all the cards are kind of pointing in a certain direction. All things, archetypal energies are pointing in a certain direction, but you do have your karmic thing that you have to unravel, and then you have to integrate something. And then once you integrate the something, what path does then that put you on? And now you're walking down that path, right? So depending on what total full action was taken, and then what you added to your mind and acknowledged about the experience. And sometimes it takes days and if not weeks for some people to actually acknowledge and register the thing that they experienced. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true, because sometimes it takes a bit of time to actually integrate an experience and go, you know what? I didn't say it in the moment, but this is how I felt. This is what I wanted to say. This is what I wanted to do. It's kind of like in the show when he comes running up to the carriage, wait, and then and wants to give once he realizes that, oh, I have an opportunity here because she isn't engaged. She isn't betrothed. She's still free agent. Where he just, declares, I've been thinking about this for weeks. It took him that long in the show to integrate what he was willing to say. Same thing can happen in real life about how long it takes someone to like sit with the one little action, and then that thing has to flow for it to like be fully integrated and like, wait a minute, come back here, right? Might take Lukey a little bit of time, but it also may take her some time. She may think more swiftly and logically on some things. He's logical, but he's not perceiving the full scale of everything happening around him, where I think she is more in tune with that. But for her, it's more, what barriers does she put up around her own Venus pleasure principle? And it's not about the snogging part. I think she has no problem with snogging and no problem with, let's have some fun, let's dance, whatever, something like that. Let's feed each other, these kinds of things. But when it comes to a committed relationship, and I'm in it for the long, hard haul that it can, to have real love connection, stay committed, that takes removing the blocks that were there from before that are in the unconscious mind, the fear of that, right? I think that's also working out. But that doesn't mean that the moment didn't materialize something that pulls it really to the pinnacle point. Pinnacle, definitely these moments. You could argue that Galway and Dublin were you're homeward bound, Nicola. He's there with you. But there are other things that have to be figured out first for both of your souls to navigate the situation, to actually really realize, is that what you want, right? Like, is that worth the risk for all the things? And how do you quiet that outside noise to make it your own? Make it your own. Because that would be imperative for these two. They have to pull things privately, because it will be a frenzy. Unless they manage it, maybe like Tom and Zendaya. That broke, right? That was visible. But they are still contained in how much they show since then. You can see them supporting each other a little bit, walking the streets here and there a little bit, but it's manageable. It's doable if they went that route, right? So I think that's important to point out. So to say something is definitive, I still think there's probabilities here, people. I am also Mercury in Capricorn, like Nicola. Her Mercury is in the middle of Capricorn, where my Mercury is at 14. Actually, we're very close. And yeah, so yeah, my midheaven is 11 degrees of Capricorn, and my Mercury is at 14. So my Mercury is so close to Nicola's Mercury. Hers just happens to be in her 12th house, which is kind of like bearing into all the collective connection and her logical thinking of how she's managing her career, all the moves, the milestones, the chronological order of things. I mean, she has a lot of energy that she participated from the social media perspective. And now I think she's evolved how she even will work with the social media, because I think she was a lot more open in 22 and 20 and parts of 23, right? But I think as this came online and how big it's gotten, I think she's going to be much more guarded in how she works the social media as well. Pretty big. Well, let me see. Is there anything else I want to point out? I don't know what the dates are for Toronto, because you kind of have to back up one day and a half for them to fly out of Rio to get to Toronto to do whatever kind of promo tour stuff they had in Toronto. I'd have to look at those dates, but you kind of look at the spread of days that they're in Brazil and figure in, the flight times on both sides, and that you just follow the moon during that period of time and what it's amplifying. So it's amplifying relationship, amplifying the past life, amplifying something to surrender about relationships, amplifying his Jupiter, his creative, his sexual nature, his Venus nature. It's amplifying her ninth house of, when you're in a foreign land, you have some of these relationship things emerge that are from the past, and you are going to be dealing with them. Number 2 is the moon was also going to be highlighting at the top of her chart about Scorpio themes. But when she's in Brazil, I'm wondering if that's now at the bottom and more of the Taurus is up, visible, and then flipped for him, his Scorpio up on his chart. So it's kind of like, I wonder if there's more intensity of the flipness on this thing, but you can read it both ways, actually. And what else? The Mars, the way that the interaction is so instinctual when you have such a high energy with Mars in its own sign, in instinctual, raw energy, just that is like boldness. So bold. Oh gosh, yeah. And yeah, what are you acting on, my dears? Yeah, I think it's I think, to me, it's grand. It's beautiful. Every soul has their journey, and I think it's beautiful. And I'm grateful to even have the rising sign so we can even play to explore these themes, because I think we learn from other people. So I'm grateful for, thank you, universe, for sharing, having Nicola share this information with us in that BuzzFeed interview in Toronto, which I'd also like to see, because I wonder when if the moon would have been going through Scorpio and then into Sag and then into Capricorn and so forth. So I wonder by the time they got to Toronto if the moon was either might be, and I don't think it would have been Sag. I think it was still in Sag when they were in Brazil. So it would be like 2 days. Yeah, it could have been the end. Yeah, it could be in the tail end of Sag and then going into Capricorn and then going into Aquarius maybe when they're in Toronto. So I'd have to look at those dates, because if the moon had moved over into Aquarius, to me that could have been how we got the information on the birth times, having that energy kind of focusing in there with the moon. Yeah, but I'll explore that. I'm not sure yet. I hope you're having fun with this information like I am. It's exciting. I'm learning a lot more about some of the asteroids that I don't spend as much time with, like Juno. Juno is very much like Hera and Zeus and Hera. Hera was the spouse to Zeus, Greek mythology, but Jupiter, Roman, okay? And what it means in the natal chart, but also in transit, what it kind of activates, right? And then over here for Lukey, and where is it? That's his natal, and then right here. But also, what else was kind of jumping out? Like Ceres was also kind of jumping out for both of them in this part of their chart under Nicola's 12th house, right there, amplifying that connection with that part of Luke's chart. But that also sends up a trine to all that Taurus energy. So that's kind of activating that. So, and there's a lot more going on with that because of the transpersonal of Neptune in Capricorn and Uranus in Capricorn for Luke. I mean, that is so huge in terms of what it opens up inside the synastry when he's connected to Nicola on her chart and how she identifies with it. It's kind of breaking open the way she will identify herself because it's on her sun, right? I mean, that's so huge. On her sun. Yeah, certain people are the catalysts for us. Luke Newton is absolutely a catalyst for Nicola. Absolutely. Okay. I have covered. Oh, and the other one is Pallas Athena. Pallas Athena has been very interesting, like in terms of it being in Scorpio and how it's activated Luke's chart, but also Nicola at the top, but absolutely for Luke. Pallas Athena is kind of the strategy, but also it's highly creative intelligence. Creative intelligence, Scorpio. I mean, that definitely came out in the interviews and how, he communicated, she as well, but definitely he did communicated parts of how, filming those intimate scenes and things like that. And the creativity that, I mean, that's one thing that came out throughout the whole tour, maybe a little bit in Rio in terms of the questions that came out, because there were some really great questions that came out in Rio, I think, in terms of what was presented. And a couple of them about how we might perceive things, about how we physically touch friends or how we physically connect with friends, right? That was in there. Another one is there's so many things within their psyche. And I think this is why the Eros and Psyche whole that I'm getting at when I'm going through all these charts is kind of like, it's almost like a paradigm shift beyond COVID era. Because we had COVID era and how that was like everybody at a distance, 6 feet away, stay away from people. Can you imagine trying to like be in your 20s and go through, you want to just be out there trying to socialize and connect with people, and then to go into lockdown. Goodness, that would have been so challenging. And the millennials definitely experienced that, right? So yeah. So, and then to be disconnected from people when you really need groups of people, you need people around you. That would have been just a real huge paradox. So it's almost like a reseeding with Eros and Psyche around your desires. It's okay to experience your desires. Your psyche is your psyche. It is you. It is your soul, and your soul has desires, and to live you really need to engage those two together and make them real in a way that is healthy, of course, consensual. I think that is part of this whole thing is consensual, healthy. Your desires are an important part of having human experience. Because I know that a lot of people after coming out of, 21, 2020, 21, through those few years, and then there was kind of on and off, like how open you could be or not be. And just in the last, since like summer of last year, where people actually would go out and be in a crowd, and I still see kind of the mix of, there's a few people that, maybe feel more comfortable by having a mask on in a crowd and things like that. And that's good. Everybody should make the choice that's right for them. But it's just like, but to me, the consciousness to try to bring all the collective people back into mixing like that, there has to be like this renewed awakening to the sensual nature of who we are as human beings as a part of our life. And, no better way, moment in time to do that than with this Jupiter and Uranus conjunction in Taurus, kind of bringing that down to earth, and new cycle opening for that, and what that means for all of us. But when it's activating your chart in a certain way, how much sensuality wants to be expressed. Yeah. So Rio de Janeiro, sun at 29 degrees of Taurus is peaking, because the next day it starts changing up and it's moving into, the sun is moving from Taurus and into Gemini. In the next 2 days, I think it holds a little bit for the next day, but it depends on how far that 29 is. But more importantly is the peaking moment here. And then it starts to shifting, but it hasn't fully shifted out of Taurus. Well, you still had Jupiter until Jupiter entered Gemini, because you have the sun. The sun's going to click at a degree a day, about, right? But it's when Jupiter then moved from Taurus to Gemini, did we have 2 coming in? Yeah. And that's important and part of the cycle of everything. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just like you have this moment, and then you have a different archetypal mix, right? So everything's divine timing. So in 24, let's go back. It would have been, what was the date of the Jupiter ingress? I think it was May 25th. Yeah, 5-6 days ish, right? I'm looking in ephemeris, but from wherever they are on Earth at that moment, they're definitely in Toronto. It starts being a slightly different energy, and I think people felt that vibe. Like, what shifted from Rio to Toronto? One, Jupiter went into Gemini. That's one, and then that Jupiter then gets amplified by none other than another person who has Jupiter in Gemini at 1 degree, Antonia. And guess who shows up in a Gemini moment? Part 2, premiere night, June 12th, Miss Antonia. But there is that's an important part of the puzzle, okay? And I don't think it as a negative thing holistically. I think it is, that is what is presenting. That's the archetypal energy that is presenting. Tunis is here. Okay, but what does that mean for him, for Luke? What does that mean for Nicola? What does that mean for Antonia, right? Like, there is something that has to be worked out amongst these individuals. And that's what we're observing. It's not for us to judge it. It's just like, oh, yes, I can see that. So if Mr. Luke Newton came and sat down for an astrology reading, you can say, oh, I can see you're probably going through something, and start ticking off some of these archetypal things that create an image of sorts, and then discussing that. And then, and then you have this person that comes in, and you can read some of theirs into the mix. But it's more about what is the soul sifting through to try to integrate for themselves to then live more authentically, and where are they trying to go, because energy is always in motion. But the soul is leaning into North Node, even though the South Node will be activated at the same time that the North Node is. It is easy to fall back in the habit of the South Node. Those are really deep grooves in the mind, in the unconscious mind especially. And so we have other relationships in our present incarnate life that land in those grooves. And some of them will be with you for life, and they play a role throughout all the different chapters of your life or your professional life, But then there are also people who come in and they act as almost like the agitator, the disruptor, the person who brings in the catalyst for you to actually make the turn for where you want to go, for what your intention was in the whole mix. Yeah. So, and it's kind of like also important to consider what is the karma wake that you are leaving. There's always a karma wake, because it's always spiraling. So it's like, oh, how did I respond to that? How do I behave to that? But then give myself grace, because, you're doing, I like to believe that people try to do their best in any given moment. I can't try to give people the benefit of the doubt. And that in any, people will acknowledge, gosh, I was not being my best myself. I was flailing all over the place. Okay, give yourself a moment. What do you need to give yourself to get back with your feet on the ground? What do you need to give yourself to secure up yourself, to have a more resolute, like, place of having, this is my viewpoint versus someone else's viewpoint? What are your boundaries? And sometimes it's very hard to have boundaries because of the makeup, the archetypal makeup of your natal chart. I mean, if someone with lots of water, people who have lots of water in their chart, it's not about the boundary that we would otherwise think of. Okay, it's more like what you give yourself and what you give yourself permission to allow into your sphere to disrupt or whatever your emotional self. Okay, so Luke has a decent amount of water in his chart. He has Scorpio with Pluto and the Psyche there. He has Mars, very important for that Scorpio, in Cancer. His moon is more than likely Cancer. And then he has that all being activated by a transiting Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, which is in his 8th house. I think that's amplifying his psychic awareness, that you get tuned into your psychic awareness when you actually practice or have a moment or an experience that opens it up first. Maybe Luke has had some of that, but he hasn't really reached out to anybody to kind of explore what that means or is turned on. If he has the capacity to be what they call a scryer. What's a scryer? I believe I'm saying that right, because I have that, where you can have dreams that actually are precognitive, or you are touching into thing like with imagery, like the oracle cards or something like that, or even something like astrology, because the symbols themselves are very much an image that we are consciously taking in. There is meaning in the symbolism of the archetypal symbols. So when you draw and actually write out the symbols, it's actually very, very powerful for yourself. But Luke himself has water, with a Leo rising. He has water in the 12th, water in the 8th, and water in the bottom of the chart in the 4th. So to me, these are very strong places for the potential for a psychic and clairvoyant, kind of having imageries, having very strong like sensory around people's emotions. Definitely, I think he picks up on that. And it's part of his like ability to pick up, but he also has the cerebral from what's coming from others. That's so much cerebral energy of Aquarius in his 7th house of other person. And yet it's crazy how much he might not be picking up on. He's just blocking, through untagging, likes, and these kinds of things, which is, that's a different kind of like, I'm guarding myself, boom, boom, boom. I'm undoing these things that, transpired by liking something, which I don't know the sense of all that, but yeah. But I trust that in time, it's to be visible. It will be visible. So will show it to you somehow, because that's the thing that has to be unravel the knot, You can tell my mother knits and crochets. So it's good symbolism, right? Good metaphor. Unravel your knots. And then you have to reweave it, That's how you can pull on the threads. Well, what else? Is there anything else that's popping on their 2 charts in Rio? I think I've covered so much already. Let me just see the next chart. See what I got in that. That's just Rio at 10 p.m. Where's the moon? The moon is still in Libra, 19. So it's squaring. When that moon hit 19, it's squaring Luke's 19 degrees, Uranus and Neptune in Capricorn, and her sun square. Some kind of tension in the moment. Yeah. Okay, let's continue. This is Luke's own chart to Rio, 10 p.m. As you can see, there's all that Taurus again. And where's that Libra? Libra's down here, that moon, activating that part of his chart, 6th house, but hitting his transpersonal planets that are responsible for other and his 8th house. So it's kind of like what's getting tripped up as it pertains to Nicola. What's the misstep here? Yeah, okay. You see that? Like, because it's in his 6th house, it's his blind spot. So something in active movement around conversation when they're together as friends trips something. They're getting tripped over by something that sits already in his natal chart that's going to activate. And then for her, it's going to trip up on her sun. So her sense of self. Yeah, but because that is air and it trines all that air, it's an easy flow in conversation. Things are flowing and they flow and also activate South Node for him. So it is possible that in those hours late on the 19th or even into the 20th, they are talking maybe about his friends. Maybe there is a conversation about that. Maybe there is, what is that? Maybe that's just not even brought up because they they only have time together. So it's, just going to be focused on them, and the rest of the world can just disappear for a moment. Oh, these are the progressions. These are the progressions on June 13th of 2025. I think I pulled that just because of where's Nicola's progressed moon. I wanted to see where it was going. And that is an important degree because it's opposite her Mars, and that's opposite of where the Saturn Neptune come to that point as well. So that's an interesting moment, but I'm not going to focus on that right now. Nicola's chart in Rio on May 19th, 10 p.m. Her North Node is very much activated. She's in a nodal return on top of that. Just having that it's in a nodal return, and the moon is on the South Node, activating a past life relationship. All the things coming forward into this moment, and all that sensuality. Scorpio midheaven, sexy, sexy. Goodness, what is being acted on instinctually? Sensuality. And there the vertex is at. This is kind of like the vertex showing, okay, there is this coming moment that starts to like digress the thing into two, and that is going to have the sun on that vertex, and then the Jupiter is going to eventually be on that vertex. And so it's like whatever happened in Rio, it has to go through the tunnel of Gemini and deal with the duality that comes of that. Yeah, it's all there. I mean, it's even in the chart in Rio that's coming, and it's even maybe in the context of being so close to the sun that even when they were in Rio, maybe on the third day, I'm going to have to check when they flew out, but that third day would have been from, so May 21st, I need to go check that day, because on what did I just say? 21st? May 21st, the sun is definitely in that Gemini spot. So that's the switch up. Starts shifting, and that would be, I don't know if Luke would have, I don't know where Antonia was during that time, if she was in the States and he stopped over. I heard a rumor, but I don't know if it's real. Did Antonia try to go to Rio at any point in time? I don't know if that's confirmed or not, and until I have hard facts, I'm not going to bring that in. But I don't know about what kind of communication they would have had. I mean, I think that tells me when the moment would have switched, where he would have been more focused into having Antonia on the mind or in the conversation or any, you know what I mean? Like, here comes the distractions of life outside of that little bubble that was, perking up to that moment, accumulating the moment of culmination that's happening in Rio between him and Nicola. So hopefully that all makes sense. Did I have that there in twice? Nope. Okay. Well, I think I covered everything I wanted to cover. Yeah. If you have any questions on this, let me know. It might make a lot of sense that I should see the date that they actually landed in Toronto, because I think that really is such a significant part of the moment that transit translates to coming out of all of that Taurus energy. And that's super important in this storyline, because it's then building towards the kind of a culminating moment on June 12th of so much Gemini energy. And so that to me is such an interesting transition moment, because even in June 12th, how that activates the Gemini energy, you can go back to the video for the June 12th, the London premiere. Go back to that video for the London premiere and look at all that Gemini energy, and then how that was going to translate to then when the PAP photos came out, June 13th, though people were sharing it online, I think before then. Some people were speaking of it that maybe were more visible to what was going on locally there in London, but it definitely hit as it snuck, kind of got leaked out. That's important to point out, because it was the release that was June 13th, 12 midnight my time, but around the world that would have been different times, right? The way that Netflix launches those things. But it's part of a bigger soul evolutionary consideration as well. So a lot of people forget that, and then they get all caught up in, it's so hard when you're just, I even get caught up in it at moments, but then I like remind myself, pull back, so you can see that there's a bigger thing going on here. And that's how you can be removed from hard judgment. I mean, I can have an opinion, but opinions seem to also can float into judgment somewhat. Okay. I guess it's how it's worded, how it's languaged, right? So I want to point that out. I think when you're studying astrology, and it's something for yourself to understand yourself as it pertains to the bigger world and your participation in it, one of the first lessons is to start releasing judgment on yourself to the degree that you can't get beyond a certain place where you've been stuck, you know? Because to live a full embodied life in all the parts of the self and acknowledge all the parts of the self and try to live in your highest frame of yourself moment to moment, what does that look like, right? I mean, the science of psychology gives us like how much we actually live out of our unconscious minds and how much people suppress or have been conditioned or whatnot. And then how do you let go of that conditioning in a healthy way, and how you bring in new ways to express yourself that you might have not given yourself the permission to because you felt shamed or felt guilt or something like that, that has prohibited you from, expressing yourself. And I love it in the storyline for Bridgerton season 3 because of the arc of the story for Penelope. So amazing to have her come and bring those two parts of herself together in Lady Whistledown and Penelope Fillington, and how beautiful that is. But then also have that supported as she realizes her potential for pleasure. I think it's a storyline for Nicola. It's like Luke has some very similar things off of his chart that are calling. Right? So good. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this. This has been fun. I love sharing astrology with you. And I think the next videos are going to be Australia and what the experiences of the promo tour were there. And also Italy. We have 2 locations in Italy, a couple events in Italy. And then I also want to look up Toronto. So those are kind of the ones coming down the line. And then I'm kind of getting to the point where I might go to my swans, Aphrodite and the swans symbolism that's through both of these co-leads, and even a little bit on Antonia. It tells me something about the archetypal nature of Aphrodite in this story, of the psyche and Aphrodite myth. And I've been reading a book that I really like, and I'll share it when I'm all done, about the story of Eros and Psyche, the myth. And also what else I wanted to bring forward just in the Bridgerton, because I want to kind of just make the playlist for Bridgerton and the promo tour. And then I have some ideas for some Netflix videos, but they will be separate, and I'll make them a playlist for like Netflix or something like that. So I can bring in Netflix and Shonda and Julia Quinn, and that's in my list. And in maybe another playlist, I'm going to start, then I will do Luke with Antonia, because I'm not going to put in Antonia within the Bridgerton playlist. I'm not, because I think that's a separate deal. Even though it played in that scenario, I'm going to make just like a astrology, chart analysis playlist and bring it into that. Okay. Yeah. Because I could just do, because we don't have a birth time or even a rising sign on Antonia. So I have to do her chart in relation to Luke, but I want it as there's Luke and all the material that was Bridgerton highly focused. And then this is something that's a side note, like I call it a footnote, because I really think that's going to be a changing paradigm and has to kind of sit in its own little separate space. And I think that's just me. I'm going to do it that way. It's my channel. So also, I think I want to do a chart on Zendaya, because I do have a birth time for Zendaya in that chart analysis. So this is kind of coming. And then I want to do Tom. And we don't have a birth time for Tom, so I have to do Zendaya and Tom on the outside. And then go back into some of the fandom of the Spider-Man detail of when they connected. I don't remember any of that, but I remember watching those movies. I was a huge fan. I just don't remember all the timing of them coming together. 2021? Yeah, something like that. But we'll get into that. That'll be fun to explore. Chart analysis, because I have to have something that's really juicy, maybe is connecting on the energy. I still want to see Eros and Psyche, but I want to see it in different frames. So it's kind of coming out of the Bridgerton season 3 material, maybe this by September-ish, end of September probably, because I'm going to do the Netflix, because I can do other things with the Netflix, and I can do a little bit with season 4, but not much, because I don't have Luke Thompson's rising sign. We just have a birthday, but we can still kind of show like Luke Thompson with Nicola, because they are castmates, and there's an interesting vibe of energy there. And we can also do Claudia Jessie with Nicola, because we have a rising sign, and I can use Nicola as the foundation and how those other friends, castmates, come into her chart, and that can give us a lot until I start rectifying some charts. But maybe that's a winter project. So I hope you enjoy. I am enjoying it. So have a great rest of your day, and if not your week. And if you are interested in astrology, you can reach out to me on waynesagesview.com, or, make a comment on the video if you have a question, also on the community page, and we'll go from there. Thank you so much. Take care.